Another draft physics presentation. Comments over there. Same old junk, really, but what the hell? Okay, so a guy called Politically Incorrect. You are right. All scientists are just fucking cowards working for the fucking scum capitalists. Okay, I never did this working for the scum capitalist part. I'll say they are fucking cowards. Just like religious people. They don't want to have to defend their faith. So they don't provide any opportunity to challenge them, to cite conflicts or incongruous bullshit. None of them really want to explain anything, obviously. I mean, this Pharaoh cell thing's been around a long time. No serious scientists are touching it or going near it or explaining it or doing anything about it. Lots of people with wacky theories out here, like me, right? You don't see any of these scientists doing any correcting or debunking. No, they pick the what do you call it, the softball targets, the there's a word for that. They pick the lamest of wackos to argue with. But anything that looks a little bit challenging, they just seem to, oh no, I'll avoid that challenge. So they seem to be very much like religious people, very uninterested in having to get into a rational discussion and defend their wackiness. So anyway, but your comment is obviously bullshit. I don't think the fucking scum capitalists are the problem. I think fucking scum capitalists are a problem, don't get me wrong. That's not what has corrupted science. Science is corrupted because the scientists are weak-minded cowards in and of themselves. The capitalists didn't make them that way. That's just the way humans come. Boom. Okay. Anyway. Alright, so the record lying fake person of some kind. The inverse square law for gravitation, by the way, is false. So, kind of an insane statement, especially in the context of this conversation where the argument is between, say, Newtonian math and Einstein math, when both of those mathematics have the inverse square law as fundamental elements. So you're just basically saying that Einstein's math is wrong. It's a stupid thing to say, I think, from your point of view. GR does not predict it. Of course it doesn't predict it because it's established it as already being a truth. It's in the math, idiot. Contrary to your made-up false claim, so again, I never claimed GR predicts the inverse square law. What I said is it doesn't explain it with a force of any kind, a mechanism. The mechanism is, as Susskind would describe it, in kind of inane ways. He'd say, well, in 2 dimensions it's like water traveling through a glass plate that's even pressure coming from an infinite source and going down an infinite well. But in 3 dimensions I can't even explain it. It's that bad, okay? They can't explain how the function of the bent spacerizing mechanism actually does the inverse square law. They can't make an animation of it, okay, in a sense. They can just make an animation of the things moving, but they can't make an animation of the force doing something. Just like the virtual photons in magnetism, just virtually photon. They really don't go anywhere or do anything. They're just somehow there's force goes out, stuff happens. Nothing in between. False claim, and has been observed to fail by the lunar ranging experiment. So that's the thing where you shoot a laser beam on the moon and reflect it off the reflectors and you prove how far away the moon is. So this guy is somehow saying those measurements indicate that the inverse square law is incorrect and doesn't exist, which is got to be insane because I've never even heard anyone whisper that, let alone say it. So without a link, this is just rubbish. Mass defect is already a common known fact in chemistry. So what does that have to do with the inverse square law? I mean, I'm not arguing that the inverse square law applies to relationships between electrons and protons, and that's what chemistry really is. All right, anyway. Mercury's precession is not due to finite speed of gravity. So, I never said it was, but the truth is there was like 87 points of inaccuracy in Newton's math. 87 points of wrongness. And applying the speed of light fixed like 37 of them. So by doing the math where Jupiter and Saturn and all the other planets are interacting with each other and interacting with the Earth and Mercury and the Sun, doing that math again with the speed of light got rid of 37 of these little broken points of bullshit. And the other 40 were gotten rid of by Einstein essentially processing the Sun, the center of the Sun's mass. That's my understanding of the improvement in the understanding post-Einstein. Now, if you have some other understanding, you can demonstrate with some sort of evidence, fine. But that's my gross simplification of the basic event of improving the understanding of the mechanics of gravity. All right. Mercury's precession is not due to a finite speed of gravity. So again, it in part is. I think that's a fact. If it were, and if it were a central force, so again, he doesn't think gravity is a central force, apparently, conservation of angular momentum would be violated. So that's just a claim. There's no references to this, so I have no idea where he has this notion. Ever so increasing until the solar system is destabilized. So where he has evidence that there's the inverse square law being applied would mean the universe falls apart. I don't see any evidence of that. This paradox can be solved by pointing out that gravity is not a central force. Okay, so he has his own theory apparently. A fringe theory, I would argue, quite obviously. And he's doing exactly what I find really repulsive, is that this whole channel is devoted to one purpose, really, to contrast my theory against conventional physics. And part of my obligation is to point out why conventional physics needs to be replaced, because it is so catastrophically flawed. And the other half is to defend my theory as a perfectly rational physical explanation for what's happening in this universe. It's not really to debunk your wacky shit. Alright, but your vision of Lesage gravity does not predict this. Yes, it does not predict that the inverse square law doesn't exist. It predicts exactly the opposite, because the whole mechanism has it written all over it. That's exactly what an external pressure does, is create the inverse square law. It's fundamental to it. Continue on. Well, whatever. Type more crap comments like this with no references to any of this crap you're claiming is a truth, and you'll be blocked. Prove it or shut up. Plainly. Alright, it is impossible to find, this is Russ Rass, okay, it is impossible to find for photons a vector valued position operator. So everybody's supposed to know what the fuck that is. With commuting coordinates which transforms under rotations like a vector. So in some way he's saying there's something what I've described in photons that he knows isn't true. So when Feynman says photons basically travel from point A to point B in a straight line at the speed of light, Feynman was full of shit. Because that's basically all I'm saying they do, retard. Okay, this impossibility has been observed without proof by Newton and Wagner in 1949. Observed without proof. I wonder what the fuck that even means. And was proven in 1962 by Reitman. Okay, so no links again. Just a claim that he thinks some Reitman guy proved that photons don't move from point A to B in a straight line at the speed of light unless they hit an electron. Even though in principle all particles can be treated as field excitations. That's your opinion. I think it's retarded. So, yes, you can describe a radio wave as a radio wave in loose conversation, but it's really a mass of things, bits, at a frequency. A bunch of bits, a bunch of bits, a bunch of bits. And yes, if they were bullets, I don't think you'd be saying a wave of bullets is coming, but maybe you would. If they were torpedoes, I don't know if you say, waves of torpedoes are coming. Well, maybe you would do that. Regardless, you wouldn't call them excitations. You wouldn't say a bunch of torpedoes are coming at your boat, and and they're all 1 second behind each other, at 1 second intervals, hundreds of them, and then hundreds more, and then hundreds more. I don't think you'd sit there and go, there's a field excitations coming. There's field excitations coming. So whatever, asshole. We fundamentally don't agree on language or what is necessarily been proven by anyone called Reitman. Alright. Photons are much different from massive particles. Well, I don't think electrons could be called massive particles in the first place. They seem pretty light when they're not moving, when there isn't force pushing them. But anyway, they are also different from massless neutrinos. Well, I don't even think neutrinos are a real thing, frankly. Okay, they're body parts after an accident. You can find people's heads and you can find legs and arms laying around. But unless there's an accident, there's no arms and legs that just walk around in the free world. You see, arms and legs only show up in like bumpers and tires just rolling down the road by themselves. That stuff only shows up when you break something. When the system's working, there aren't any neutrinos doing anything. In my opinion, it's complete bullshit. Okay. Photons are much different from massive particles. They are also different from massless neutrinos. Yes, I would agree, because, yes, I don't think there is a neutrino. Since the photon number does not obey, I don't think the photons have a number, except for one. They all have exactly the same number. Every single one of them has exactly the same number on the ton part, the bit part. Okay? We call something that has a frequency a photon. That means it has more than one of them for us to recognize it. So every time you say, I see a photon, you really didn't see a photon. You saw numerous bits traveling at a frequency. Dumb fuckers. Anyway, since the photon number does not obey a conservation law, well, again, the photon number does, if you understand the photon is made of the tons, the bits, then it does no problem at all. Because obviously more bits in one thing you're calling a photon. Well, if you're counting 4 things and calling that a photon, or 2 things and calling it a photon, or 10 things and calling it a photon, well, you're sort of making a mistake. Because they're different. Yeah, more is different than less. More different than less. Okay. Let's see, where was I? What appears at the photodetector, here we go again, photodetector, okay, that's an interesting use, as a sequence of photon particles, that is, bits of energy hitting, arriving is a form is arriving is from the perspective of quantum electrodynamics. Says you. That's the entire theory that is in dispute here. Is any of this nonsense quantum crapola about photons turning into little motorboats, separate, they break into two, they transform into two little boats, and the little boats go in their separate directions, and then they communicate with each other and say, let's agree on going there, because we can't go separate places, we have to go to the same place, and then they recombine into the main transformer and then hit the wall. I think all of that crap is just a big pile of steaming shit. Bunch of crap just made up in people's wacky imaginations. No reason, no good reason to believe any of that made up crap. Alright. Electrodynamics, the manifestation of a single non-stationary pulsed one photon state of the electromagnetic field. So that makes something, that means something. So it's a pulse in two different fields that are bisected, and some kind of blah blah, and then blah 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 blah. But actually no mechanism here at all, no evidence that any of these fields exist, no reason to believe in them. This isn't the theory of evolution, it isn't a reasonable theory, it isn't a theory with lots of evidence filling up all the little holes. It's just a silly made up fable, and because it doesn't have gingerbread houses in it, somehow you people fall for it. But it's just as bad as talking bears. Alright. Manifestation of a single non-stationary pulsed one photon state, non-stationary. I love that. Yes, that's right. Photons are always moving the speed of light, so I guess it can't be stationary, can it? Amazing! Alright, electromagnetic field. I am not interested in changing your ideas, but I don't seem to understand correctly what you are talking about. Well, I'm talking about the fact that there are bits of energy in the universe, force bits, and they account for all the stuff moving the speed of light. And there are matter bits, electrons and protons, and the force bits interact with the electrons and protons in specific ways, because there are two kinds of force, electron force and proton force, and there are two kinds of matter, proton and electron. And the electron force reflects off the electrons, the proton force reflects off of protons, and the vice versa is when an electron force hits a proton, it leaves perpendicularly, and when a proton force hits an electron, it leaves perpendicularly. There. You can't understand that? That's the basic idea. And if you take that basic idea and play with the geometry, you can make a very, very complex universe. Okay, but you don't seem to understand correctly what you are talking about. So somehow I don't understand that principle. The simple idea of this turn, which creates the ability to create a trap, a circle. 4 right turns is a circle. You see, circle, trap. And that's what matter does. It traps. That's what atoms do. It traps force in circles, cul-de-sacs of no escape. They can sit in there for centuries, just trapped, 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 trapped. And all of a sudden one day, they're free. You can't understand that because you're a dumb fuck. Okay, in quantum mechanics, the concept of field takes over on both particles and waves. Yeah, I'm disputing quantum mechanics. You don't get that? Then really, you're really stupid. Okay, really, really, really stupid. So at any rate, there's absolutely no content in this. No proof of this Reitman proving anything. No proof that my description of a photon is inconsistent with any piece of evidence. Any piece of evidence. Any piece of evidence whatsoever. So provide evidence that I've said something inconsistent with an actual piece of evidence, or fuck off. Alright. Robert Price. Okay, so a link to NASA. Alright, so this is a quote, I guess. Because Hubble was designed to pick up very faint light, the telescope must be pointed at least 50 degrees away from the sun at all times. 50 degrees. 50 degrees, no, 50 degrees away? That's 100 degrees. It can't look at 100 degrees of the available sky? The Hubble telescope is a weird instrument. I mean, I think it's orbiting the Earth like 18 times a day. Like, you know, every 70 minutes or something it goes around the Earth. I mean, it's moving pretty fast. I don't know why they put it up higher. Well, anyway, if sunlight enters the telescope, well, the whole point would be not to let sunlight enter the telescope. So let's understand that we agree sunlight shouldn't enter the telescope. That would be bad. The bright light could damage the detectors and degrade the black paint lining, the optical tube that prevents reflections from stray light. Well, at least they did that much. But I would argue that it's not very difficult to prevent that from happening. This is NASA, after all, right? I mean, these are the guys who, you know, Apollo 13 blew up on its way to the moon, and these are the guys that figured out how to get those guys home alive. And they did that. And you're saying to me they can't figure out how to keep a little tiny bit of light from getting into their telescope. Bullshit. Anyway, stray light. There's no such thing as stray light in this scenario, so let's understand that too. There's no stray light. There's no... You can't stop sunlight from reflecting off a piece of space junk. So the telescope is always vulnerable to a little shard of stray light. It can never be protected from that. It can be looking this way and see light reflect off a fucking wrench. So it's not perfectly immune to stray light. Additionally, the heat could cause expansion of the structure that holds the mirrors. Well, the fact that they have it going around the Earth means that it goes from light to dark 18 times a day. So I imagine it's pretty thermally stable, interfering with the telescope's focus. Alright, so these people just don't want to accept the simple argument, right? The simple argument is that if we take away the Earth's atmosphere, then people could use telescopes during the day, right? The atmosphere is what ruins telescopes during the day. That's the simple argument. Fundamentally, that's the game blower, okay, is the scatter. So we take away the atmosphere, so we're like the moon, okay? No atmosphere, nice and clean all the time. No atmospheric scatter, no haze. So the sun is in a spot, and the sunlight is basically parallel rays coming at you, because the sun is very far away. So if you want to look next to the sun, all you have to do is keep any of the parallel rays, the direct rays from the sun, from getting into the telescope. And the simple argument would be is, like, even if you just had a door on the... I think the Hubble has a door. You know, a little opening and closing door. I think it actually has one. So all you have to do is open the door with the sun over here, right on this side of the door, okay? And you should be able to look right next to the sun with no problems. No sunlight should be able to directly get into your telescope. I think that's theoretically correct. I think if we got rid of the atmosphere on Earth, big telescopes could look right next to the sun, no big deal. I mean, they can't look at the corona, let's say, way too bright. But, you know, a little bit away, no problem. And you're saying that can't happen. And I'm saying even let's just say the Hubble is such a girly telescope that it just can't handle any of this. I'd still argue we have some 400 satellites in geocentric orbit that are looking at the Earth, photographing the Earth every day. And all of those telescopes are pretty good. You know, they're not shitty telescopes and cameras. And I'm sure they're powerful enough to do this experiment. And none of them have done it. And I'm also sure that all those shuttle missions, I'm sure they had a nice 7 or 10-inch telescope they took up to space now and then to go looking around. Sure they did. None of those telescopes did the experiment. So all this crap that there's not a single space-based telescope with all this crap, all this NASA crap in space. They don't have one single imaging device capable of not being so girly it can't look next to the sun. I say bullshit. Because I say if I was on Earth and the sun was causing a problem, I'd just have to put a tennis ball. You know, I could create a fake eclipse anytime I wanted to. And I could just put a tennis ball in front of the sun. And I've gotten rid of all the haze and all of the sunlight, and I can just look wherever I want. Why not? Why won't that work? I mean, you people are just so full of shit. So anyway, so he comments on his own video, on his own comment. Great. And it can look right next to the sun without hurting itself at all. Oh boy, oh boy. I don't know how much more apparent it can be made that your arguments pivot off of false facts. Okay, so you're saying there's a real fact that it isn't atmospheric scatter that prevents Earth-bound telescopes from looking at the universe near the sun. You're saying it's something about the sun itself, that the telescope can't be anywhere within 50 degrees of the sun without way too much sunlight getting inside the telescope. And you're saying they have no mechanism, like just putting a round thing on the lens. They don't have any mechanism to block the sun, to block the extra light, the whatever it is light, the light that they can't stop somehow by not looking at it. So you're basically telling me that even if, like I said, we got rid of the atmosphere, and so during a sunny day the whole sky is black and there's just one little sun up there, alright, and there's, you know, the surface is still lit, but the atmosphere doesn't scatter any of the light, so I can see all of the stars, and somehow with my dopey eyes I'll be able to look at the sun pretty much and see stars next to it. You're saying that doesn't really happen. Well, let's say not next to it, you know, outside the corona. You're saying I won't be able to see those stars, and I'll die. I'll be blind. I'm saying no, I won't. I mean, obviously I can't look at the sun very long. So I'm not saying I can look at the sun. Sunglasses, let's say. Some filter for the worst of the rays, especially the ultraviolet ones. But this is just bullshit. Okay. Same asshole commenting his own video. So you start with a false premise. You suggest a fucking conspiracy theory. I suggest an insane disinterest in a subject for which there should be interest. And I'm saying, why the disinterest? It seems like scientists really should kind of have a horny for the publicity of validating Einstein. Like, that's always kind of a cool thing to do if you can do it, right? I mean, the LIGO people advertised all over the place, we're proving Einstein now, even though that wasn't even Einstein's theory, right? That's not even something Einstein thought really could happen, ironically. But they were spilling Einstein's name over everything. We proved Einstein. And so here you have a basic experiment, fundamental to physics, that really hasn't been proven, you know, decisively by any experiment. And somehow you're going to tell me that none of the physicists out there see opportunity knocking. I think what they see is, ooh, this is a problem, because this is a difficult experiment to pull off. And they run away. Because the truth is, you don't have to get very far from the sun for the amount of diffraction, you know, the deflection, to become very, very, very small. And the fact is the corona, if you look at it in the eclipse images, is rather very, very big. Okay, it's a solar radius thick. So you know you can't be looking at shit through that, because that's just scatter. Alright, anyway. You start with the false premise, you suggest a fucking conspiracy theory, then you dismiss the Hippocraticus dismission for no reason. Well, I dismissed it because it's inanely and insanely complex, and it's mostly just algorithms and computer theoretical crap. It really doesn't have anything to do with reality. And if you think they're sitting there doing this, oh, we scientifically figured out how much the suns are all jiggling, and we unjiggled all of them with our software. Fine. If you want to believe that crap, believe it. I'm saying it doesn't really provide hard evidence of solar lensing, especially when every single one of those stars has a corona. Some of them are very big and dense corona. So how the fuck can you make a distinction between light scattering, okay, and actual straight line beams of sunlight? Well, guess what? You can't. Amazing. I honestly don't even think people, I mean, just understand, Einstein was pointing out this is why you won't see gravitational lensing, was this very reason, that it has to be on the surface of a very heavy object, and the only really heavy objects, heavy enough, are suns, and they're on fire, which means you can't look near their surface, because they have a huge amount of dirt around them, energetic dirt. And you can't see through the dirt. Fuck. And so, if you're taking pictures of the whole universe and that you're seeing suns behind other suns and vibrating and all this stuff, how can you do that? How can you lens with a tiny sun very far away against its surface without it being called scatter? Alright, I honestly don't even think people are even paying attention. Well, that's good. It's clear people don't care about the truth. That's a fact. They don't care about defending anything they believe. They don't care about having a fair fight. They don't care about any idea of a battlefield of ideas and a fair winner taking the ground. They're just slimy pieces of shit. Smelly, slimy pieces of shit. Might as well live on a slug planet. You people are so intellectually dim. Alright, they just hear what they want to hear from DraftScience without having a grasp on anything discussed, and you think you have a grasp on something. You think you somehow have defended the pristineness of your evidence, that the evidence is so secure and so solid. Everybody has to believe space is bent. Everybody has to believe time is a dimension. Everybody has to believe that photons are bent by gravity. Everybody has to believe that photons are wavitons really, and that they split into two identities, and then those identities recollapse into a single form. And everybody has to believe that photons are entangled little pairs, and they're sensing each other's condition, and communicating instantaneously with each other. Everybody has to believe this pile of complete fucking crap. All with a big pile of whipped cream bullshit, dark fucking matter to spread on top. Complete, made up, fluffy bullshit. Alright. So we're back to correct the record. Your statement that the start of these experiments weren't ever repeated is a lie. So yeah, I might as well delete that now because I've already responded to it. And it's rude as fuck. I didn't lie about anything. So anyway, yeah, that's enough. Time for dinner and such. Just want to get this done because I might not have time later, so I thought I better do it now. Just see if there's more comments while I'm here. Oh dear, there is one. Alright, DraftScience idiot. The Lorentz force is the magnetic force of electrons. So again, my argument is I don't have to acknowledge Lorentz force. There's no such thing as Lorentz force. There's either magnetism or electricity. Those are the things that exist. Lorentz force is not a thing. Okay, that's just your choice to sit there and say. I mean, I don't say Franklin positive electricity or Franklin negative electricity. You know, why should I acknowledge Lorenz, the stinking lousy piece of shit cunt bag? I don't have any obligation to acknowledge Lorenz, the ether theorist. Okay, that's how cyclotrons work. You wouldn't know that, of course. So again, you're arguing that if it's a magnetic force, it has to be called the Lorenz force. No, I don't have to call it that. Fuck you. That's simple enough. Amazing. Okay, yeah, so I guess that's it. I don't think there's anything else. No, don't see anything there, don't see anything there. Fine, we're done. So, till the next time and such. So forth and whatnot. So yeah, I want to do part 3 in the videos 1, 2, 3, 4. But you know, I really do want to just consolidate all these rubbish subjects. You know, bent time and space and time dilation. All these are all rubbish subjects. They're really not anything to do with physics. Into one video. But obviously, that has to be one hell of a video to point out how none of this stuff is integral to the real function of the universe. The real important forces are magnetism and electricity and gravity. That's the real game, because all the nuclear forces are basically magnetism. And that's the more important subject, in my opinion. And being distracted by all this rubbishy nonsense talk about bent dimensions and multiverses is such a colossal waste of fucking time. The end. Yes, video completed.